All season, we said it was either going to be the New York Mets, the Atlanta Braves, or the Los Angeles Dodgers that would make it out of the National League and go to the World Series. Well, here we are at the NLCS. It's Phillies Padres. What happened? We'll discuss on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. And earlier this season, speaking of Just Baseball, I had a betting preview that I did with Peter Apple of Just Baseball, co-founder. He also does not gambling advice with us over there. So he was my gambling expert. And I know this was one place where I said this, but I think I said this on our preseason podcast with all of the hosts from the NL East. This is a take I had, and I'm looking back on it now, and I'm pretty proud of it, I guess. I said going into the season that the Phillies had a better chance at winning the World Series than winning the National East, because I felt like they were a flawed roster that had a chance to make it as a wild card team, but didn't really have a chance to actually edge out the Braves or the Mets over a 162. And trust me, that was about all I had right on the Phillies this year, because then if you've been listening to this show since the beginning, you heard me many times laughing at the Phillies when the Mets came back from down 7-1 and when the Phillies had the worst defense you could imagine and Alec Boehm was having to apologize to the fans after the fact when during the game he made so many errors and the camera caught him, talking about how much he hated Philadelphia because of how bad it can get. And there was so much negativity around there. And then they fired Joe Girardi and they just go on this magical run. And it's crazy because I am so torn here. Now, next segment, we'll go through the Padres-Dodgers element of this, but you look at this first series that closed up, the Braves and the Phillies, and in some respects, I was relieved because it feels like the Braves are the team the Mets are going to be going up against for the next decade. That's every single year, Steve Cohen is going to either have a franchise that's built to win or he's going to pour money on it to try to win. So every year they're going to contend. The Braves have a young core that is the envy of every team in baseball right now. I mean, what they have built down there with the contract extensions they continue to give out, they have locked up a group of young players that, aside from potential Dansby Swanson leaving or things of that nature, they're going to stick together. They're going to be really good. So for the Braves to get out, there was a big part of me that was just straight relief. I was just like, you know what? All right. As much as the Mets missed an opportunity to win the division, as much as the Mets could have gone on a deep playoff run, fine. Here we are, and you move on from it because Braves are out too, and that was the team that you were always kind of competing against. But then at the same time, now the Phillies have a chance to do something special. And I remember what I felt like last year when the Braves, were able to grab the division from the Mets and get into the playoffs, but they weren't this high win total team, and we weren't really sure how they would fare. And then just each round it started building and building and building. In the beginning you're like, all right, well, and they're having their fun, and then they make it out and they end up in the championship series, they win that, and then they're in the World Series, and then somehow they pull that off. And now with this Phillies team, I mean, they're looking like a team of destiny all of a sudden. And like I said in that preseason podcast, I mentioned it many times throughout the year on my show, on Just Baseball shows and articles. This is the best puncher's chance team in the sport. And, obviously a team like the Braves or the Mets could deliver a great punch, but it's more that boxer that is less talented, that doesn't have the same quickness, that doesn't have the footwork, that maybe doesn't have the typical stamina. But on the right night, if they land a couple of hooks, they can win any fight. And that's what the Phillies are. They have two really good pitchers in Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. They have some star players. And, Bryce Harper at this point is, one of the best vets in the game. A guy that has been in a lot of big spots. Granted, he doesn't have a World Series to his name yet, doesn't have a ton of playoff success, but he's not getting phased by this moment. He is, thriving in these moments. And you have a guy like Nick Castellanos, who had a horrible season, yet, still has enough of a pedigree that you get him into some big games and you throw out the stats of the season, you give him a fresh slate, and he's coming through. And they have these scrappy guys like Gene Segura, and they have Brandon Marsh suddenly, who looks like a better hitter, who's giving them a solidified defense in the outfield. They just did a great job at the trade deadline. They got a couple of pieces that really made sense for them. In the offseason, they got Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, and while Castellanos wasn't great, Schwarber helped get them through the year, and now here they both are in the playoffs, helping them advance. It's just it's a good story for that fan base. It's a good story for that team, but it still underscores the fact that the New York Mets were significantly better than this team in the season. They went 14-5 against them. It just shows you the crapshoot that is October baseball. Now, it gets back to my original point where all last week, whenever we did discuss the playoffs and what happened to the Mets, I continued to harp on the fact that losing the division was the thing that still upset me. Getting bounced in the playoffs in the wild card round was frustrating, but here the Padres are, and they've proven that they can beat anyone. They just beat the 110 win Dodgers. So here you are, or maybe the 109, but regardless, here we are at this point where we're in the NLCS, and those two teams, the two teams that going into this playoff run, nobody gave a shot. It was, if not the Braves, the Mets, or the Dodgers, it's the Cardinals will have a magical run with Yachty and Albert going out. None of those teams are left. It's the two underdogs. Just shows you that every year you got to get into the dance. The Mets did that this year, and that's an accomplishment moving forward. You just want as many cracks at it as you can, and you want to build out a team that can succeed in October. And I think that's what these two franchises, the Phillies and the Padres, have shown us. You just need the right couple components here, and you can go on a special run. So we'll dive into the Padres next, because what they did was more impressive even than I think what the Phillies pulled off to beat that Dodgers team. Not easy to do, and it was a great accomplishment. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But I'll tell you, if you notice, if you're watching on YouTube, the background has changed a little bit. We still have the Locked On Mets banner behind us, or what has been in the Locked On Mets studio wherever I have gone. But the paint around it is different. I'm actually in a brand new apartment, and when you're in a new place, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable, not knowing the area if you're safe. But for me personally, I had a lot of comfort, when my head hit the pillow for the first time in this apartment last night, because I have SimpliSafe installed, so I know I'm okay. The numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right, and that's SimpliSafe. Your safety is the only thing that matters. I know that again because I've had SimpliSafe in my last place. I got it here. It makes me feel secure knowing that they have a cutting-edge security technology that's behind my place, powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. SimpliSafe's agents call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch the police or first responders in an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, with HD security cameras installed for inside and outside of your home. They also have smarter ways to detect motion that only alerts you when a threat is real, and they even have hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. You'll save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan. Get your first month for free by visiting simplisafe.com with the code, or simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. The San Diego Padres advanced past the Dodgers to set up a Phillies-Padres NLCS. I'm sure the TV networks aren't happy, but the fan bases are for these two teams that are Cinderella stories right now. And, for the Padres, they were as aggressive as any team in baseball at the deadline. And you looked at the net result of their moves, flops in the season. Okay, Josh Hader, horrible run of it when he came over. Juan Soto really struggled. Josh Bell, I called it. I did call it abysmal in the regular season in the second half. Brandon Drury wasn't good either. But they still got all of that talent and they found their way into the dance. And once you're there, anything can happen. And suddenly Juan Soto is tying a game with a clutch hit. Josh Bell hit a clutch home run against the Mets. Josh Hader is closing out games against the Dodgers looking like the Josh Hader from the Brewers. Suddenly, this Padres team is looking like a legitimate World Series threat here. Obviously, they're in the NLCS. They just have to get past the Phillies, and they will be there. And then anything can happen, even if they're going up against the Astros. They have 3 starting pitchers that you go to battle with Yu Darvish, Blake Snell, and Joe Musgrove. I'm not even going to hear it when it comes to his ears and all that stuff. At this point, look, they're letting him pitch. They're checking him between each inning. He's fine. If we find out later there's something going on, get mad about it then. Right now, I want you to respect that this is a guy that really has turned himself into one of the best pitchers in baseball that's pitching for his hometown team and is thriving in the biggest moments. So with those 3 guys, they can go into any series feeling pretty confident that they have a good chance at the beginning of games. And if you grab a lead in the playoffs, that'll take you a far way. And they're just putting together great at-bats as a team. And that's what the Mets did all year. And I think what they're showing us is that the Mets weren't far off. And what I mean by that is, the Mets had an approach as a team offensively, very similar to the approach that has been working for the Padres in the playoffs. I mean, Trent Grisham killed the Mets with the home run ball, but look, they just had a rally the other night that won and clinched them that series where it was, pass the baton, draw your walks, get your timely hits. And that's something we saw the Mets do all season. And, having 3 starters that you could trust. The Mets did that. And I think on tomorrow's show, we'll be discussing that a little bit further, how the Mets, gambled and bet everything on Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, and they came up losers. And that's shocking when they got where you wanted them to go with healthy versions of Scherzer and deGrom. Then again, we don't know exactly how healthy Scherzer was with that oblique, but still, he was able to take the ball, and he wouldn't use it as an excuse. They got themselves in that position with the 3 guys that they wanted this offseason, with deGrom healthy, and with acquiring Scherzer by signing him and acquiring Bassett through trade. They had their 3 starters, and they lost. They lost to a team that just beat the Dodgers, a team that I think is certainly proving that they're really good as well. And I think as much as you can see the difference between the Padres and the Mets, or the Phillies and the Mets, or the just that top tier that we saw throughout a 162 where, there's less holes on the Dodgers, the Mets, and the Braves when it comes to going up against the bad teams and, just finding a way to win as many series as possible and stacking up, where a team like the Padres or the Phillies might be more susceptible to some slow, stretches throughout the year where they're losing a little bit. When you get into October baseball and you're only playing a series at a time, it's just about having enough high-end talent to win when it matters most. And it's, having someone like a Trent Grisham who gives you one thing that you can trust in October: great defense in center field. But he also has an ability to run into some baseballs, and he's done that. These are the type of players that I think thrive on a big stage. And when the Mets are building out their roster this offseason, they have to be cognizant to not only build out their depth, but make sure they got the high-end talent and the pieces in place that can shine through when the lights are the brightest. And I think they're in a good position overall, but a lot of work has to be done. And, it is just crazy to think that here the Padres and Phillies are, and the Mets, the Braves, and the Dodgers are at home. Does that make you feel better, though, as a fan today? We'll explore that a little more in just a minute, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. Does this make you feel better as a Mets fan? The fact that the team that beat you just beat the Dodgers. The fact that the Braves are out of it. That's the one thing that does make me feel better. I'll say that on the front end. If I had to power rank my feelings right now, the one that's bringing me the most joy is the fact that those Braves fans who were so loud and obnoxious, not that us Mets fans can't be at times as well. I'm not going to ignore the glass house I'm living in here, but that fan base that during a playoff game against the Phillies, who they probably should have been worried about a little bit more, they flashed on their Jumbotron, when are the Mets playing tonight? Well, you were worried about your wrong NL East division foe. You didn't think too much about the one in front of you, and they kicked your ass and they beat you. So that makes me feel good. I was rooting for the Phillies in that series, absolutely. But now the page turns to the NLCS, and I'm at this point where I can no longer root for the Phillies. There was only one team in baseball that I would root for the Phillies against. And that's them playing against the Braves. Even if it was a Phillies-Yankees World Series, I think I'd let the Yankees get number 28. And I know that's crazy to a lot of fans out there. But look, to me, I hate seeing someone in your division win a World Series. And whether the Mets still haven't since '86. I'm sure other people would say that the Yankees would be the only other team they would root for the Phillies over. And I respect that opinion. But now we're at this point where we'll see what happens with Yankees Guardians. You could get to a point where the Guardians are, right now, so it's 4-2 as I'm recording at 9 o'clock on Sunday night here. So 4-2 Yankees. Looks like that could be heading towards a game 5. You could be a point where are you rooting for the Astros? Are you rooting for the Phillies? The Guardians are, I think, everyone's last hope here to have a World Series champion we could celebrate with Andres Gimenez and Ahmed Rosario getting that type of a moment. But right now, I feel better, again, that the Braves are out, but I don't feel great that the Phillies are in. And I don't necessarily love rooting for a Padres team that I just hated about a week ago. So there's not a lot of good options left in the National League card. I guess I'm rooting for the American League side, minus the Yankees. If the Guardians can handle business, then hey, let the cheating Astros from 17 validate their franchise with another World Series. Let the Guardians, that would be the most ideal scenario left. But currently, I feel better than I did a week ago. But it still sucks that the Mets are home right now. And you just have to turn the page to next year, which we will be doing throughout the week on this show. On tomorrow's show, another look into Scherzer, DeGrom. The Mets bet everything on them, and they lost. What should they do moving forward? Should they continue to bet on them, and how do they fill out a rotation behind them if they do? That's what we'll explore. But make sure you're following. Make sure you rate and review so you can get that episode. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered with everything that's going on in the playoffs right now. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.